we're always able to work with anyone within the value chain. It's kind of funny. This is one of the great things about being on the board. It doesn't matter how difficult some of the discussions or some of the conversation is around the board table. We're always able to go and have a beer afterwards type thing, because we got to support the barley industry, right? And I think everyone sort of enjoys that, and the fact that we can have different opinions, but it's still very respected opinions on both sides. We bring a lot of just kind of some basic common sense and basic sort of, well, what makes sense for producers today?
Welcome to the Barley Bin. SaskBarley's goal is to take you right into the barley bin, not a hopper bin or a bin with in-floor augers, but the kind you'd spend a bit of time shoveling, getting itchy. It's worth it for the pint or steak afterwards, or a golden nugget you sometimes find uncovering itchy topics.
I'm your host, Mitchell Japp. This episode, I'm joined by Jill McDonald and Cody Glenn. Jill is Executive Director of SaskBarley, and Cody is the Chair of the SaskBarley Board of Directors. They're here to talk with me about sector partnerships. This is a new pillar in SaskBarley's strategic plan. Welcome, Jill and Cody.
Thanks for inviting me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Yeah, so I'm fourth generation barley farmer from Climax, Saskatchewan. Grow all different types of crops, but also a certified seed grower and own a grain exporting and handling company in Climax.
Thanks, Cody. Jill?
Yeah, I actually started with SaskBarley in 2014. So it feels like yesterday and then also like forever, but enjoy every day working with SaskBarley and working for farmers and improving the industry.
Great. Well, as I said, we're here to talk about sector partnerships, and maybe just to get into the topic right off the bat, why are partnerships so important to SaskBarley that it became a pillar of the new strategic plan?
I think when the board did the strategic planning and you went through the list of the groups that we interact with literally on a daily basis, it became clear how important partnerships were to the organization. SaskBarley is kind of a medium-sized commission. We don't have as big a checkoff revenue as wheat or canola. And so we really have to leverage every dollar that we receive in checkoff and use that with partner organizations to amplify the activities we do, get better results that when we can, working with partners, and also I think making sure that those relationships within the value chain and then also with other industry organizations is really strong.
I noticed when I joined SaskBarley and my work previous, when I worked adjacent to SaskBarley, that there's a lot of interconnectedness throughout the value chain in barley, perhaps more so than in some of the other commodities. Is that part of where this comes from?
I would say yes, for sure. As Jill alluded to, barley is a smaller crop than the wheat and the pulses of Saskatchewan or even Canada. So we do need to use these partnerships to leverage both dollars and knowledge throughout Saskatchewan and Canada.
Yeah, and I think that when we leverage those partnerships, as Mitchell, you just talked about, that there is quite a bit of connection between farmers and the end users within barley. So we work with our partner organizations like the Brewing and Malting Barley Research Institute, and that has all maltster and brewer members, as well as the Canadian Malting Barley Technical Centre that has, through its membership, has line companies, the farmer commissions, maltsters and brewers as well, that you really need that interconnected relationship to move issues forward in the industry.
Great. So you mentioned the BMBRI, the Brewing and Malting Barley Research Institute, and CMBTC, the Canadian Malting Barley Technical Center. Who are some of the other groups that SaskBarley interacts with? Who are its main partners beyond those two?
So we have what we would consider really are the key value chain players, like we just mentioned, the Brewing and Malting Barley Research Institute, the Canadian Malting Barley Technical Center. We also work with Cereals Canada on the market access side. And on the research side within barley, we have the Canadian Barley Research Coalition. When we get into issues like policy and advocacy, we are recent members of the Grain Growers of Canada and also work really closely with our other crop commissions through Sask Crops on that policy and advocacy piece. And we have what we kind of put in a bucket as the consumer outreach partners within Farm and Food Care Saskatchewan and Egg in the Classroom. So each of those partnerships has very specific outcomes and activities that we are engaging with them on.
That's a lot of different organizations.
Yeah, that's what we spend our day doing, is seems to be interacting. But I think it's also about literally just getting the best use of the levy dollars to be efficient in the organization and get the maximum impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And so thinking about that impact and efficiency that Jill just mentioned, I'll maybe put it to Cody. How is it from your perspective as a farmer on the board of directors? How do those relationships help stretch the farmer levy dollars beyond what it can do internally within SaskBarley?
Well, I think it's huge, really. Just to stretch those levy dollars is like I said earlier, barley is a relatively small crop, and we don't have the levy dollars like some of the other commissions. So working hand in hand with, like Jill alluded to, the CMBTC on market development or grain growers or, egg in the classroom, I think it goes hand in hand.
It seems to me that most of the work that gets done throughout these partnerships is stuff that would need to be done whether the partnership existed or not. And how far could the levy take SaskBarley without these partnerships?
The work that we do with our partners would need to be done if they didn't exist. When you have partner organizations that you can work with, and whether it be amplify the message or I don't want to always use the words efficiency, but it is about efficiency because you have experts in those areas that can reach places that we couldn't with our limited staff. If we had to do all the activities without partners, we would need a much greater staff complement to complete all the activities. And when you have expertise and capacity that can exist in other organizations, let's partner with them and use that expertise in a positive way, right? Like it's about building those relationships and partnerships.
These organizations, they've got implications down from the local level within the province up to national and even international based on some of the activities that they're doing. Cody, you've just been on a mission with the CMBTC to enhance market development, and you've done another mission in the past that's more about maintaining market and maintaining relationships. How has your experience been on those missions in terms of being able to get Saskatchewan and Canadian barley into these places that we need to be able to sell our barley to?
I think they've been huge, like you just said, Mitchell, just coming off of the Mexico mission, which was more of a source finding mission for lack of better terms, and then going on the China mission, which was more of maintaining Canadian malt and barley mission. But I think that they are absolutely huge to Canadian barley farmers the Canadian malt industry, the Canadian barley industry in a whole. And I don't honestly think that without the partnerships like the CMBTC, I don't think we would have got the bang for our buck that we did coming off of those missions without that partnership.
And yet, the CMBTC is doing the organizing, but the feedback I've had is that it's been really important to have farmers there as well.
It is huge. You sit down in a meeting, and whether you're in China or Mexico or Japan or wherever you happen to be, they want to talk to the boots on the ground farmer. The first questions always go to the farmer. The first questions don't go to the line companies or the maltsters. They want to talk to the producer that's growing the product.
Yeah, absolutely critical. So that's some of the market development work that happens through these partnerships. What about amplifying the voice from a policy or advocacy perspective at the provincial or national level? How much further does SaskBarley's voice go through the partner organizations?
Well, I think one of the great examples we've got is, SaskBarley recently, within the past year, decided to join the Grain Growers of Canada. And it was partly because we were seeing the potential for a lot of the trade disruptions that have actually now come to fruition. We saw a lot of that potential that could be happening and wanted to make sure that we had a team approach to be advocating on issues like trade access or market access. We wanted to make sure we had, the presence and the voice to the federal government. So if we didn't have some of these partnerships in place, it would go back to the idea that we just can't have as much of a voice in some of the places where we need it right now. Ottawa, we have a good working relationship with the provincial government, but even our provincial government, those relationships need maintenance. And we can do that through working together as crop commissions, talking to our elected politicians to make sure they're aware of the impact of agriculture, and then getting down into the impact of the barley industry in the province and across Canada.
Cody, through your work with CMBTC, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's how the connection you had. You got invited down to a conference in Colorado this past year, and that was an opportunity for you to talk about how sustainable production happens on a Saskatchewan farm. I would guess that's maybe something that some of the farmers that are farming in Saskatchewan aren't hearing about from the buyers, is that they talk a lot about sustainability, and that's a lot of the conversations we have, and we're trying to talk about the message about how sustainable production is here. What would you say your experience was being at that conference there, and how did the message get received?
Yes, I did, through the CMBTC, get invited down to an RMI analytics conference in Denver in June, and the buzzword there, but not only there, but in the industry, is sustainability. And it was very well received. As a farmer, we've done everything in our power to be sustainable for the last 100 years, because as a farmer, if you're not sustainable, you're not still a farmer currently. But I think, to answer your question, it was very well received, and I think it was very good knowledge for not only the barley producers in the room or the maltsters in the room or the line companies, but as well as we had everybody there from aluminum can manufacturers to producers and recyclers of malt bags. And you could tell that the topic of conversation was sustainability. During my presentation, I used the word no-till a few times, and I had probably 5 or 6 people come up to me at that conference and said, I have a question for you. What does till mean? And when I explained to them, they were absolutely blown away. So,
Yeah, it's quite remarkable, something that's so common in our conversations here, because we've been around no-till for so long. It's not well known elsewhere in the world, and certainly not when you get outside of the agricultural, the direct production part of agriculture.
Yeah, for sure.
So throughout all of these organizations, SaskBarley invests in them. They've got some connections with them throughout boards and how they work together. How is SaskBarley making sure that those connections are ensuring that farmer priorities from within Saskatchewan are part of the work that these partner organizations are doing?
Well, I think we directly represent farmers and are accountable to our farmers. It's a farmer elected and directed board within SaskBarley. And so all the activities, all the priorities that come from our board of directors are brought forward to those partner organizations. And by representing that, the partner organizations, in order to continue developing a positive relationship, they're responding to the interests that we're bringing forward. And, not to be harsh on this, but you can withdraw your membership dollars out of some of these organizations, right? So if we weren't having our farmer interests represented at those organizations, we wouldn't continue to be members, bluntly. So,
And how many of those organizations have a SaskBarley director sitting somewhere connected through the organization?
the majority of them do. So the only one we don't directly have a SaskBarley director sitting on would be the Egg in the Classroom board, but we do always get direct reports from that organization, and the accountability of those organizations is to be reporting on their activities, and it's reviewed by our board of directors. So every year, the memberships or the strategic partnerships we've got with these, those are reviewed annually by the board to make sure they're delivering the value that the board sees within that partnership.
Many of those organizations are also reporting on what their deliverables were for the past year, and those are included in SaskBarley's reporting to
Yeah.
the members.
Yes, all of them.
So I guess connected with that is that maybe one form of measurement. Are there other forms of measurement to evaluate the return or the impact to the farmers in Saskatchewan?
Yeah, I think it depends on, we've talked about these buckets of how we look at them within sector partnerships. I think it depends on the bucket each of those memberships fall into. We see our partnerships on the consumer advocacy side as long-term investments that may not be seeing results or shifting attitudes immediately, but we want to see the shifting in attitudes for the next generation, and keeping people informed with that. Some of the other pieces that we work with, we do see more direct results, I think, like our, the work with on the policy and advocacy side. Some of those policy issues take a long time, but other times the advocacy work we do, we are seeing that change from federal government policy or, even provincial policy with that. You can look at the market development work we do, like Cody talked about earlier, was the market development in-market work. Some of those activities, it's going to take a couple of years before we see the results. But the important part is to be monitoring the relationships that have been built through that and continuing to build on them. So new markets, when you're accessing them, it can be 5, sometimes 10 years. But if we're not doing it today, then we're definitely not going to have results in the future. So we better be working with our partners today to look at new markets.
I think it's a great approach, and for so many things that we do, there really has to be a long-term mindset. Variety development is one of our major investments. It's outside of the scope of what we're talking about today, but definitely a long-term investment. So back to Cody, you've talked about the missions you went on, and obviously there's value to the overall barley value chain and developing the markets. What would you say would be your perspective as an individual farmer for doing that work of market development? How does it affect you potentially on a day-to-day?
I think as a regular day-to-day farmer, it makes you stop and think. As a farmer, you're just used to putting that seed in the ground and getting it to harvest and putting it into the bin. And I don't want to speak for all farmers, but I think a lot of farmers, they don't think of what happens to it after that and how much legwork goes into, you know, just because you grow it doesn't mean that there's a market for it somewhere else. And if there's no market for it somewhere else, you're not going to grow it. So I think it's opened my mind huge just to stop and think when you're in the sprayer or when you're standing out there in your field to go, well, where's this crop going in the end? And what's it going to be used for? I think it's huge.
So in addition to your role as chair of SaskBarley, you're chair of the Canadian Barley Research Coalition, which is probably the premier group that we work and partner with to fund barley research in Western Canada. How's your farmer perspective been and your role there, whereas the Canadian Barley Research Coalition is funding core breeding agreements with the main public breeders at Crop Development Centre in Canada. It's administering the barley cluster, and it's got the Grow Barley program for barley, advancing barley agronomy.
Again, I would say eye-opening for sure, even as a seed grower, and maybe having a different perspective as a non-seed grower farmer, but to see it come right from the research side through the core breeding agreements, through the breeders. It's, yeah, the amount that I've learned is absolutely astronomical.
Awesome. So thinking forward, and I know there's always discussions that happen internally, so maybe there's things that you can't say, but are there any key areas where SaskBarley sees opportunities to build or enhance upon existing partnerships or find new partnerships?
I think there's always opportunity to be enhancing partnerships, right? I mean, partnerships require trust. You know, it requires an investment of time to build those partnerships and to talk about the alignment you have on strategic priorities and developing positions. I think right now, given the current situation, if we're looking at building even stronger partnerships, I think it's got to be happening on market development and I'm going to say this, even the infrastructure to get our product to other trading partners. Those are key pieces that we as an agriculture industry have to keep working together on. In the past, barley's been very reliant on the Chinese and American market. And while those markets are obviously still really important, we've got to be furthering other areas to be strong trading partners in barley, but recognizing there are other products that are still going into those markets, and we need to be continuing to build stronger relationships across the agriculture industry to get those key pieces in place for a strong Canadian agriculture system.
After we're done here and you're interacting with other farmers in your area, maybe one or two of them have listened to this by then and they come up and ask, well, what difference does this make to me on my farm? What would you tell them?
You're sitting in this room with a board of directors, and the issues sometimes are so big to tackle, right? And then you have to, I think we're always being accountable to our producer farmers, right? Like that's always top of mind for the board. But then the issues become so big to tackle. To take that individual result back to a farmer, like on Coffee Row, can sometimes be hard to distill down, I think. But I also say, where would we be in the barley industry right now if we didn't have a group like SaskBarley on like the new varieties we've got coming out and the production targets we're hitting, the work we've done on agronomy in barley, the work we've done, honestly, just advocating at the federal government level, and I hate to keep bringing that up, but there's been a decade where agriculture we had to prove what we were actually doing on sustainability. And if you didn't have groups like this, I think that the industry would be much worse off. And if we didn't have the partnerships that we have. But how do you say that to the guy on Coffee Row? Well,
I think you just need to sit down and have a coffee with him and explain what we do as SaskBarley and with partnerships and how integral that is in Canadian barley, and try to portray that message that we are investing in research and market development, and everything we do correlates back
to what's in the best interest of farmers.
of their farm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I also liked what you had said earlier about the importance of market development. That's not going to be done by one farm. It's not going to be done by one organization. It takes a team coming together from multiple different organizations through a body like CMBTC that can coordinate it to do that outreach.
Yes, I mean, one farmer didn't go to Mexico to try and promote Canadian barley. The Canadian barley industry went to Mexico to promote Canadian barley. That's Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the CMBTC, and with a unified voice, I think that's where you can really make some traction.
Yeah, and I always say, the work we do here, it's, to Mitchell's point, it's individual companies, as in farms, that have come together to work collectively through a commission to get more work done. And then it's like that when you're working with these other partners, right? You've got your individual groups that you can come together and get even greater results.
Awesome. So, just one more quick question for you. How can farmers learn more or stay connected with this type of work that SaskBarley is doing?
Well, I always say to make my communications staff happy that follow along on SaskBarley.com, our website, or on Facebook and X. We also have a Barley Bin monthly e-newsletter that you can subscribe to, where we provide market insights, production resources, or industry updates. And I think those are the easiest ways to get connected with us. But always happy to hear from farmers and get feedback on our activities too.
Great. Well, thanks, Jill and Cody, for joining me here today. I think it's been a great conversation. Sector partnerships, it's a big part of our work at SaskBarley, and I think you've done a great job at portraying why it's so important. If you've liked what you've heard here, rate the podcast, tell a friend, and subscribe. SaskBarley will be bringing you back to the Barley Bin to hop in and get itchy. Till next time, signing off.
Thanks for listening to the Barley Bin. Rate our podcast, subscribe, and tell a friend to tune in wherever you listen to podcasts. Brought to you by SaskBarley, because it's time to get in the bin and get itchy.
Produced at
Sound Lounge by T-Bone.